Welcome to Love String, love stories that tie us all together. I am your host, Rachel Fiorello, a true believer in love and now a dedicated teller of love stories. In episode 2, we will meet Matt Gilhooly. Matt lost his mom when he was just 8 years old, and he tells us what it was like to grow up without her and the love that stays around forever. So, sit back, open up your hearts, and get ready to fall in love. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited to talk to you because I think so many people out there, when you think about a love story, you think about this romantic side, right? Like this romantic connection. And I think for you, it's obviously quite different. And I was so excited to talk to you because this is just as much a love story. Like we genuinely love our family members equally the same.
Mm.
So I'm really excited to talk to you.
Well, I'm looking forward to sharing my story.
So why don't you just get us started? Tell us a little bit about your childhood, kind of where Matt came from.
Sure. I was born up in a town called Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston or so. And I lived with both of my parents for a little bit, and then they divorced probably around the time I was 5 or 6 years old. I don't quite remember that. And I was mostly living with my mom after that, and kind of basically hanging out with her. I was an only child, so we were pretty close. Spent most of the time together, except when I was visiting my dad, and she was kind of the rock of the family. And my dad, I saw him on weekends and throughout the week, but my main place of living was with my mom. Um, so it was, it was a great relationship, but uh, it was so long ago, trying to think back.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny when you think about your childhood, sometimes you wonder like, are these my memories or are these
Right.
like memories from pictures, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, a lot of those I have a lot of pictures for probably the first 8 years of my life. And I don't, I look back, I'm like, oh, I don't even remember that place. Or I'll have like these little moments of remembering, and I'm like, did that really happen? Or, oh, there's picture proof. So I know that it has.
Yeah, yeah. So what were some of your fun things to do, if you can recall any particular moment or something that kind of takes you back to that time in your childhood with your mom?
I do remember, I mean, I feel like a lot of them are these pivotal moments of around the time when my parents got divorced, and a lot of the memories were my mother taking me to school or picking me up. They weren't specific, but I remember, like sitting in the back seat and we would listen to the radio. And she actually had like one of those Snuggie bear dolls that would be buckled up next to me in the back seat so I didn't feel so lonely. It's like little things like that where, you know, vacations I don't really remember. I remember we used to watch, it's going to tell you my age, but we used to watch Murder She Wrote together. And I had no idea. I mean, I was probably like 5 or 6, maybe 7, didn't really know what was actually happening in it. But I remember that my mom used to drink like a giant mug of hot tea, and she apparently put a lot of sugar in it. And my favorite thing to do was we would fall asleep on the couch or something. She would, and there would be a little bit of tea with like a whole bunch of sugar left over in the morning. And I would sneak down early to drink what was left of my mom's tea. And I can like remember that vividly happening all the time.
That's the sweetest thing ever. I love that. Literally the sweetest thing ever.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. There was a lot of sugar in there. And I think that I drink a lot of tea now, and I think maybe part of that is just like that connection to when I was a kid and that comfort of waking up in the morning and kind of sneaking that little treat before she got up.
Can you take us to that time in your life when ultimately your life was changed forever? What happened? Kind of just walk us through that time.
Yeah, and I'll preface this by saying this is what I think I remember. I was 8 years old when my mom passed, and kind of the time period around that, there was a lot of missing moments, and I'm not sure if that's just myself blocking that or whatnot. But basically, I was my dad had moved to Georgia earlier in the year that my mom died, and I was actually down for the summer visiting my father. And at the time, my mom was dating a wonderful man, and I thought, eventually they would get married. And what they liked to do was go with a bunch of friends on like some upright motorcycles. I call them upright because they're not really the ones that people go speeding by you on the highway that you don't like too much. So they were doing kind of a motorcade, and they would go from the Boston area to Denver, Colorado, and back. And there was, a collection of friends, and they had done it before. And that particular time, and I think back to it now, I, I, I would say as an 8-year old, I fought my mother to not go, and I don't know if that was kind of a premonition or something, but I vividly remember like having arguments of like you can't go, and I don't know why, but she went obviously because she was an adult, and that was fine, and I was visiting my father in Georgia, and on their trip, there was bad weather, and they got in a single vehicle accident on their motorcycle. I guess they hit some oil slick or something in the Buffalo, New York area, and both her and her boyfriend died that day. He died on the scene, and then my mom died a couple hours later in the hospital. Um, and there was obviously a lot of injuries. They were fully protected with all the gear, but motorcycles aren't kind of the safest thing that I've seen. So later that day, it was weird. My dad would always pick me up after work because he obviously had to work over the summer when I didn't, because I was 8. And that particular day, his boss's wife picked me up early from the aftercare or whatever I was going to, and I thought that was weird. And from what I recall, she was very quiet on the trip, and I was, completely confused, but also like, okay, cool. I'm leaving early. And I remember her walking me into their office and walking me to my dad's office and walking into the room. And I don't remember what he said specifically, but I do know, like now, after talking to him, he said it was like the hardest thing he's ever had to say to anyone in his entire life. Um, and so I just remember like shock, like unsure of what it meant. Um, but my dad told me face to face. I didn't find out another way, and I'm thankful that that's the way I found out, and that he handled it so well. But it really, uh, it I like to say that it took the lives that we had and like kicked them around a bit, and then all the pieces came back together, but in a completely different way, and really shot my life in a totally different direction.
What happened after that time? Did you stay in Georgia? Did you go back to Massachusetts?
So what I remember, or what I kind of remember, is the 2 weeks or so after my mom passed. Um, it feels like it was one day, but at the same time, it feels like it was a month. And I know that my father and I went back to Massachusetts because that's where my mother and I lived, and that's where my mom's family was, and that's where she was going to be buried, and the funeral and all those pieces. And so we went up there pretty quickly, and I think we were there. Was my mom passed away on Labor Day in 1989, and so it was like a holiday weekend, and so things were delayed because of that. So we were um, up in Massachusetts for a good amount of time, One, because we had to go through the place that I lived with my mother because my parents were divorced and kind of identify what was coming back to my new life, which was going to be in Georgia immediately after the services and the burial. So on top of, having a parent removed from my life, I also lost the ability to see my friends and those kind of things, and had to start a new life in a new state at a new school after the school year began. So it was kind of like a lot of things, and I think that's probably why I don't recall specific moments. I mean, I remember the wake, and people coming in, and me inappropriately going up to the casket, and but it was all I needed that proof, I guess, or to make it real, or something. But everything is just like piecemeal memories, and I don't really know what happened around that time period. But I did shortly after move to Georgia and start a new life.
Do you feel that your dad helped keep some of your mom's memories alive? Do you feel you were able to kind of continue? I know this is a weird question, but to continue that relationship with your mom even through this awful accident?
So that's a tough question, and I don't know if I have an answer for it. I feel like my family, and maybe it was more so my father's mother, who um, kind of kept the memories of my mother alive for me. My mom and my grandmother, my dad's mother, were essentially best friends, and they spent a lot of time together. So they had a lot of memories, and my grandmother worked to make sure that I remembered those or at least knew about them. My father did as well, um, but I think he was of the mindset that the less we talk about it, the easier it will be for me to continue. And, maybe not a rational thought now as an adult thinking back, but at the time, I believe he was just trying to protect me from sadness and trying to continue on with what was going on. So, yes and no, I think is the answer to your question.
Do you feel at all that you missed out on having her as a huge part of your life in the physical sense? And, what do you feel? What difference did you have in your life
Yeah.
not having her there?
I think I definitely, early on, or when I was, 8, 9, 10, I definitely felt the lack of a mother figure, because that's the time period in your life when you are, with your friends, you're going to their house and you're seeing their family dynamics and meeting their parents, that they have both of them, or those kind of moments where you're constantly reminded that, oh, you no longer have that parental piece. And so I think I was very aware of the fact that I was missing something. And two, I had lived with my mother mostly for years leading up to that, and only spent time with my father on weekends or those kind of things. So moving into that space, I didn't, as much as he loved me, it was a different kind of love. It wasn't that motherly love. It was, more stereotypical father love. Um, and one, his world has just been completely changed too. So he's going through whatever he was going through. So I believe emotionally there was a big hole, not having a mother figure there. But that being said, I had my grandmother who still lived in Massachusetts, but she was still trying to do what she could to fill in, um, kind of those gaps that were missing. But I will say, from the age of like 8 to probably 15 or 16, I really pushed down that grief. And I would say that, knowing what I know now, I wish I had never done that, because I think it changed my life more in a negative way than maybe, I it could have had a totally different trajectory if I had, processed that grief early and done those kind of things. Um, I feel like my new life was me trying to prove to everyone around me, including my family and friends, that I was okay. I wasn't going to let this one thing in my life change, my success or whatever I'm going to do. And I felt like I was always trying to prove something. And because of that, I don't think I allowed myself to be a child and make mistakes and learn those kind of things. It was always about pleasing the people around me, especially my father, because a child's brain is thinking, okay, he's lost one parent. If you don't do what's right, you might lose the other parent. And then what? And I know it's all irrational, but as an 8-year old, you're kind of stuck in that mindset of like loss when you experience it. So I would say that it took a long while to realize that I should process the grief of losing someone and I should live more authentically. Um, but I mean, I guess that was all part of my journey to not do that and to know now and to just share the story for people that have lost someone, like a parent early in their life, that maybe they should process that sooner rather than later.
I'm so curious in your mind. I mean, you've just explained how much your life had changed and how much you felt you had to uphold this standard that you kind of set for yourself as a young child. In there, did this love go for your mom? Like where through your adolescence, through your adulthood, what kind of love is still there or maybe not there for her? Can you kind of walk me through that love story aspect of it?
Yeah, from as a child that we were very connected, and I felt very loved, and what people tell me is that I was my mother's world, and everything that she did was for me, and she cherished me, and I remember feeling that way. Um, I don't necessarily think I took it all in as a child or had enough wherewithal to really reciprocate that. But at the same time, I know we were connected. And for years after she passed, I lived in the fact that now, well, she loved me, in person. And then after she passed, I would talk to her and kind of feel, okay, if something's going right, she's helped me out, and she's watching over me, and bad things aren't going to happen to me because and now, lucky me, is I have this kind of guardian angel, if you will, loving me from afar, and that at any moment in time, I can talk to her. And so I would say probably until those adolescent years, that's what kind of got me through, is the fact that she's always going to love me, and it's always going to be, I'm going to be protected by that love. As I grew older and through the teenage years, I think things started to disappear in that sense. I It was always just like it became more of the memories of her and how much she loved me and the stories that my grandmother would tell or my dad would tell. Um, but I think it could also be the bond that I created with my grandmother, who became another mother figure for me, um, and became someone that I could confide in and feel unconditional love from. That because I had that, I no longer needed to hold on so tightly to the love that I had for my mother, because I had a present, in person, unconditional love that luckily kind of saved me from that. And as I get older, um, I don't, I remember my mother less and less. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Um, I just think it's how my life has progressed, and the fortunate situations in which I've had mother figures jump in to my life at different periods when I needed them. And so I didn't have to like hold on to something I had so very long ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and everyone has to, of course, process it, in their own way. And so it's very interesting to hear, how you've taken that love and kind of transformed it as you
Hmm.
felt you needed it through the years.
Yeah. And I've been so fortunate, and I don't know if this is because I lost a mother, but I've had I've connected with friends' mothers so deeply in so many different instances that have taken me in and said, basically, you're an additional son, and so I've been so lucky to have experienced that in my teenage years, in my 20s, in my 30s, even now, I have people that I would consider a second mother to me, and I think that I don't know if it's because I've lost a mom that I've always been seeking that, but I do find that I've been lucky to experience that multiple times in different ways.
Yeah, like as a mom, you want to give that love to other children who you feel need it too. So I'm sure they felt the same way, giving you that love.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that as a mother, you may feel, I can't imagine what that child is going through, or that teenager, or whatever, without a mother seeing him do these things, or um, being around for questions, or whatever it may be. And so they were just so gracious, and still are. Some have passed since, and so I've had to re-grieve. Even as recently as last month, I lost someone, and they were a mother figure for me for the last 20 years.
Mm.
And so, it's, I know how to grieve that now, which is a weird thing to say. And now I can cherish those moments. And I think losing someone so early, you're reminded that each moment should be remembered, and each moment should be cherished in its own way. And you don't know that as a kid. Like, had I known my mom was going to pass at 8, I would have, remembered everything I could. But that's not what we're afforded. We don't get to know these kind of things.
Sure. What has losing your mom at such a young age taught you about love?
Well, I think it's what I just mentioned, is the fact that it can't. I don't want to say it can be taken away, but that someone you love so dearly and the things that you cherish can be stripped from you in a way that you don't want to. And so I think it's so important to be authentic and share what you're feeling and how you're feeling with the people that you have that love for, whether it's a friend love, whether it's a romantic love, whether it's, a familial love. It it's I think once I got through my grieving process, I I knew I had to tell the people that I love them. And I think that's made me a stronger person emotionally. So I think in the long run, losing that love early on has allowed me to love more authentically and more intensely as an adult. It's hard for me to verbalize that losing someone that I loved so dearly has actually benefited me as an adult when it comes to my emotions and how I feel about people and the connections that I allow myself to create. Because you don't want to put a positive spin on something that is so tragic, but there is beauty in that loss. And so that's when I encounter people that have lost someone that they love, whether it's a romantic person or partner, or someone in their family, I so encourage them to grieve in whatever way, um, quickly, not quickly, but like, do it, live in it, because you will come out a different person, but you'll have these qualities because of that loss. that will probably be even stronger and more intense on the other side.
What do you want people to take away from, again, I call it your love story in a very different way, but specifically that admiration that a child has for their parent? I mean, what can people take away from this?
I think initially, when someone finds out that you've lost a parent, and you've lost like that motherly love so early on, the initial response is a sadness and a pity. And I don't, as almost 40 years old now, I don't see that any longer as something to be pitied, because I have learned so much about love because of that loss. And I think I've been able to do something that maybe I wouldn't have had I not lost that, and realized how important connection and love like that is. I don't think I would have forged all these relationships with other motherly figures, and have benefited so much from them had I not experienced such a major loss at a young age. So I think I want people to know that love like that, even though it's lost, can continue on in other ways and manifest based on how you grieve that loss. For instance, all the other relationships that I've been able to experience in my life because my mother passed so early. So I think there's a positive in something that can be so tragic.
Matt, thank you so much for sharing your story and really just speaking so truthfully and openly about some things that people may not, be able to look at so easily and kind of see what it is that you're saying. So it was so nice to hear from your side and your perspective and how you've used that to become this, obviously well-rounded adult.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Some days more so than others.
Hey, aren't we all? No.
No, I think it's so important to realize that we're all going to experience love in a super exciting way, and then unfortunately we all might experience some loss, and there's got to be some beauty in what can come after.
Thanks for listening to Love String, love stories that tie us all together. Join us for our next episode, where we hear the love story of Heather and Bo. They started their marriage while living apart and then faced struggles with infertility. We'll find out where their love story has since taken them. If you have a love story you want to share, we want to hear it. Email us at lovestringpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to give us a 5-star review. Until then, keep looking for it. Love is all around.